All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Nicole, and welcome back to our English class. All right. I'm so excited to kick off our very first session, our lecture on something incredibly important in English pronunciation, which is on intonation. Now, in intonation, you can think of it as the music of English. It is all about how our voices rise and falls when we speak. So, just like notes in a song, these changes in pitch add so much meaning, so much emotion, and clarity to our words. Because without it, English can sound a bit flat, no, and it can even lead to misunderstandings. Now, today, we're not just, of course, going to talk about it, but also we're going to dive right into its concepts, how important it is. Of course, some tips into intonation, all those things. As clearly stated in title, this is an introduction to intonation. Okay, we'll start with some fundamental concepts with about intonation. So our goal for day one is just to really open our ears and feel how these ups and downs of our voice change the message, the importance of it, what are these. Now all things considered when we talk about intonation. Okay, let's start right away. All right. Okay, let's start our discussion on intonation right from the very beginning, of course. It's very important that we're going to focus on a very clear and simple idea. What is intonation? Now, here, by definition, intonation refers to the rise and fall of voice pitch while speaking. So, let's break down this definition very carefully using simple words so we understand each part fully. First, let's think about voice pitch. What does pitch mean when we're talking about our voice? Imagine you are listening to different musical notes. No, some notes are very high, like a bird singing, and some notes are very low, like the rumble of a big truck, maybe. So your voice does the same thing. When you speak, your voice is not just one flat unchanging sound. Of course, no, it's not monotonous unless you intend it to be monotonous. So it naturally goes up and down, which makes higher sounds at some points and lower sounds at others. So that's what pitch is, which is how high or low your voice sounds at any given moment. Now let's add rise and fall to that. Okay? Rise and fall of our voice. This means that your voice does not stay at one high level or one low level for a long time. Instead, it is constantly moving. Sometimes your voice starts at a regular level, then it goes up. Of course, that's the rise part. And then, of course, it might come down again. That's the regular level. No, not the regular level, but that's the fall part. So think of it like a roller coaster of your voice, or like waves in the ocean that go up and then come down. These continuous movements, these going up and coming down, is what makes our speech sound natural and interesting. Okay? Finally, the definition says also while speaking. Now, this is important. Okay, this is important because it means we're talking about how our voice changes naturally during everyday conversation. We're not talking about singing, we're not talking about shouting or whispering. We're focusing on the normal everyday way we use our voice to communicate words, to communicate with others. So it is something everyone does automatically, which is often without even realizing it. Okay, so putting it all together, intonation is simply the overall, how would you say that, overall pattern that is created by these constant changes in how high or low our voice sounds as we speak. Okay? It is the natural melody of our language, even though it might sound like a technical word. It is something that we all do naturally, and understanding it helps us to speak and understand English much better. It's just the way our voice dance as we form our words. Basically, that's the kind of analogy that I can think of. Okay, all right. let's move on. Let's continue our journey into the world of intonation. We've already talked about what intonation is, the rise and fall of our voice. That's the core concept. Now the big question is why intonation matters, of course. Of course, it's very important that we know its importance. Now, our slide here, it really hits on the core reasons why this seemingly small detail in our speech is actually incredibly important. Okay? Now, the main point, as highlighted by the slide, is that intonation, it affects the meaning, it affects the emotion and intent behind words. So let's unpack that a bit because it's a very powerful idea. First, intonation directly affects the meaning of what we say. This is a huge point. It means that the exact same words said in a different way can carry a completely different message. Your voice's movement can tell the listener if you are serious, if you are joking, or if you are just asking for more information, which is all without changing a single word. So all of those nuances are just done by a single word, but they are different. They convey different meaning depending on the intonation. Okay? Second, intonation clearly shows our emotion. So when we speak, our intonation is more of like a window into our feelings. It instantly tells the listener if we are happy, if we are sad, if we are excited, maybe bored, maybe angry, or even confused. So we don't need to say, I am surprised or I am sad if our voice already sounds surprised or if our voice already sounds sad. So the intonation itself, it carries that feeling directly. Okay? Third, for a moment. Let me just, okay. Third, intonation communicates our intent. Okay? This means it shows what we want to do with our words. That's the intent, what we want. Are we asking a question? Are we giving an order? Are we simply stating a fact? Or maybe are we trying to be polite or firm? So the way our voice rises and falls, it helps the listener understand our purpose and what kind of response we are expecting. Okay, to make this even clearer, let's look at the specific example provided in the slide under meaning changes. Okay, the slide here on meaning changes, it states that different intonation can change the meaning of the same word. So this is such a critical concept. Now consider the word really. Okay, I'll say really again, really, really, something like that. Okay, really or really. That is a flat tone. Okay. Of course, when we try to say something in a flat tone, usually, no, but not most of the time, not all the time, usually we are not interested. We are trying to convey a message that, no, I'm not interested, something like that. Because imagine someone saying that word, no, really, with their voice staying at pretty much the same level throughout the word without much up or down movement, especially at the very end. It's like speaking on a straight flat line. When you hear really said this way, the intonation immediately tells you that the person is not interested. They might be bored or they are simply acknowledging what you said without just, any real enthusiasm or deeper thoughts. So the lack of any vocal energy or movement, it shows a lack of engagement from them. It's a very, casual, if I may say, almost dismissive response. Really? Something like that. Okay? Now, on the second version, really, really, really. So there's a rising tone there, no? Where we can maybe take it as a surprised, no? A surprise tone. So you can imagine, I'm sorry for that. Excuse me for a moment. All right, okay, continuing with the second really. We can imagine someone saying, "Really?" with your voice, with their voice going up at the end of the word. So their pitch clearly lifts off. It rises, just like the shape of a question mark. So when we hear really said with this rising tone, of course, the intonation instantly tells us that the person is surprised. They're likely asking for more information or maybe for confirmation because they can't quite believe what they have just heard. So the upward movement of the voice, it conveys a strong sense of wonder, a strong sense of disbelief, or even just, a slight shock. So these two simple examples powerfully show that intonation is not just a small unimportant detail in our speech, it is a fundamental and very powerful part of communication because it carries a huge amount of meaning. It carries a huge amount of emotion and intent, often more than the words themselves can do on their own. So, understanding and using intonation correctly is key to making sure that your message is clearly understood and to sound natural when you speak English, as it really truly helps us navigate the rich message behind spoken English language. Okay? All right. Let's keep exploring why intonation is so incredibly important in English. We've already discussed that the first one is it causes the meaning to change. Second, here is grammar signal. Now it says it tells the listener whether you are asking, telling, or suggesting. So think about this without changing any of your words. Your voice's movement can instantly signal what kind of message you are trying to send to your recipient of the message. So, for example, if your voice goes up at the end of the sentence, it very often means you're asking a question. Like if you say, "You are tired? Are you okay? Everything fine?" No? With your voice, your voice is going up here. So most likely, no, there is a big chance that it is a question, even though the words are a statement. Okay? On the other hand, if your voice goes down at the end, it usually means you're telling someone something, like making a clear statement. For example, you're tired. Okay, let's use the same sentence. You're tired. Everything is fine. Everything is good. So that's with a falling voice, which is most likely it implies a simple statement or of fact. Okay, simple statement basically. So here, if your voice even has a softer or more gentle or rising than falling movement, it might be a suggestion like perhaps we could meet later. So intonation, it acts, if I must say, it acts like a secret code in our voice that helps the listener immediately know the type of message you are sending. Like, are you asking for information? Are you giving information? Or maybe offering an idea? So it helps to guide the whole conversation. Okay? Next, emotion and attitude. It shows how you feel, may it be happy, bored, angry, unsure, and the like. So this is truly fascinating because your voice, it paints a picture of your inner feelings, even if you don't say them directly with words. Okay? Because if you are happy, your voice might naturally bounce around more, maybe with a lot of enthusiastic rise and falls. If you are bored, your voice might sound very flat and moving, no monotonous. If you are angry, your voice might drop sharply or have a very firm final falling pattern. And even if you are unsure, your voice might rise at the end, like almost questioning. No? You're still questioning things. So, intonation is a direct way for your voice to tell the listener your mood and your attitude towards what you are saying. Okay? All right. And lastly, we have listener engagement. Now, here, good intonation, I'm sorry. Good intonation makes you easier to understand and more pleasant to listen to. So when someone uses good intonation, Their speech is not just like a string of words, it is a natural melody and a lively flow, which we also talked about as rhythm here. This makes it much, easier for the listener to follow along with what you are saying and to grasp the meaning without effort. Okay? Um, what I'm talking about, you can think about it like this. You can imagine listening to someone speak in a very flat voice all the time without any changes in pitch or rhythm. It would be, of course, very tiring and difficult to pay attention to if you're the recipient of the message, if you're the listener, something like that. But with good intention, your speech becomes alive. It draws the listener in, it makes your conversation more enjoyable and interesting to hear. So it helps ensure that your important message is not only received clearly, but also in a way that feels natural and good to listen to. So, in short, these points truly emphasize how vital intonation is for clear communication. It is not just about the words, it's about how those words are delivered, okay? Because it helps clarify grammar, it expresses our feelings, it makes our speech understandable and enjoyable for everyone listening. Okay? All right. Let's take an even closer look at the different parts that make up intonation. Now, we've talked about the basic ideas, and now this slide gives us a more detailed breakdown of the components of intonation. Now, there are seven important pieces that are all working together to create the full picture of how our voice moves when we speak. Okay, for a moment, let me check my slide if it is working well. Okay, it's reflecting the same thing, I guess, in my end. All right, okay, all good. All right, continuing. First, we have pitch. Now, the slide defines pitch as high or low notes in your voice. This is truly the fundamental building block of intonation because imagine your voice like a musical instrument. Sometimes it plays very high notes, and other times it plays very low notes. So, when we speak, our voice is constantly moving between these higher and lower sounds. No, this movement of pitch is exactly what intonation is about, the rising and falling of our voice. If our voice stayed at just one single pitch, the rising and falling, not the rising, but um, it's more of like a flat line. Yes, that's how we term it. It would, of course, it would sound very boring, robotic, monotonous. Pitch changes are essential because they help us understand if we are asking a question where our voice often goes up at the end, or simply just stating a fact where our voice often goes down. It's the basic melody that guides our words, basically. Okay? All right. Next to this is stress. Now, these are which words or syllables are louder or clearer. That's stress. When we speak, we understand stress. We understand what stress is. When we speak, we don't really give equal importance to every single part of every word or every single word in a sentence. Instead, we naturally put more emphasis or stress on certain parts. So, this means we might say those specific words or parts of words a little bit louder, or we might hold into their sounds for a slightly longer time, or sometimes we even say them with a slightly higher pitch. Okay? By stressing certain words, we make them stand out. This is how we highlight the most important information in our message, which is directing the listener's attention to what is new, to what is important, or what we really want to emphasize. So, stress really helps guide the listener to the core of our meaning. Okay? Next to that is rhythm. Now, this is how sounds and silences are organized. You can think of rhythm as the natural beat and flow of spoken language. Just like music has a beat, of course, our speech is also a unique pattern of sounds and pauses. Now, in English, we don't speak every syllable at the exact same speed or with the same emphasis. Some parts are stressed and therefore seem longer or stronger, while other parts are unstressed and spoken more quickly. So, this combination of stressed and unstressed parts, along with the natural pauses, like or silences, even those pauses that we take, It creates a distinctive timing or beat for our sentences. So a good rhythm, it makes our speech sound very smooth. It will make it sound more natural and easy to follow. So it helps basically the listeners. I'm sorry. It helps the listeners process our words effortlessly and understand the natural grouping of our thoughts. So it really helps the listener or the recipient of the message. Okay. Fourth, range. Wide range is equal to lively, narrow range is equal to flat board. Okay, now range refers to how much your voice's pitch moves up and down throughout your speech. Okay, if someone uses a wide range, it means that their voice pitch moves quite a lot, going from very high to very low pitches often and sometimes quite dramatically. So this usually makes their speech sound lively, sound energetic and full of emotions. It suggests that they are enthusiastic, they're excited, or very interested in what they are saying. Okay? On the other hand, if someone uses a narrow range, their voice pitch stays mostly at one level, with very little movement between high and low sounds. So this often makes their speech sound flat or bored. It suggests a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of interest, or perhaps even tiredness. So the range of our voice gives important clues about our emotional state and how engaged we are. So I've been really repeating all the same things or all the same concepts or all the same ideas because that's what intonation is. Okay, like I've been repeating about rising, falling, and even flat tones because it really applies to these terms because these are again components of intonation. Okay. Next to range, we have nuclear stress or tonic syllable. Now if you're with me in our previous sessions, I've already focused. I've allotted certain parts, not a few minutes, not a few minutes, but I think a couple of minutes on this term, nuclear stress. Okay, you can look back at our previous sessions. I forgot which video, but yes. The component here is defined as the most important word in a chunk. Now, this is a very specific and crucial type of stress. In every natural group of words that we speak, which we often call a chunk or thought group, which is our next point, there is usually one single word that carries the main new information or the main focus of that particular group of words. We give extra special emphasis to this word. Excuse me, sorry for that. So again, we put emphasis on this word. It is often where the how do you call that, is where often the biggest pitch change, either a rise or fall, happens within that phrase. So this special emphasis on the most important word is called nuclear stress. And of course, the syllable within that word that carries the main pitch change is usually called the tonic syllable. It's like shining a spotlight on the key piece of information in that small part of your sentence. So it tells the listener exactly what they should really pay attention to. Okay? That's on nuclear stress. The most important, the very specific, it's a very specific and crucial type of stress. It's referring to a chunk or maybe a word or part of the word that is our main focus in the sentence. So this is if you want to, check the discussion about this nuclear stress. I guess this was on the topic about word stress, if I'm not mistaken, something of that sort. Word stress. You can try to find it. Word stress. I've highlighted there what I've elaborated, expounded what nuclear stress is, and even gave some examples. Okay. All right. Sixth, we have chunking or thought groups. Let me just check. Let me just check for a moment if my slide is all good. Okay, all good. I think it's reflecting the same slide that I have. All right, that's good. Okay, we have continuing, we have chunking or thought group. So the it is breaking speech into natural phrases. Now, when we speak, everyone, we don't usually say one very long continuous stream of words without any breaks, right? Instead, we naturally divide our speech into smaller, more manageable, how do you call that? More manageable and meaningful groups of words. So these are called chunks or thought groups. They are like little mini sentences or phrases that logically belong together. For example, instead of saying, I'm sorry, instead of saying, I need to go to the grocery store to buy some milk and bread, we would naturally say, I need to go to the store, the grocery store, to buy some milk and bread. These natural breaks and pauses and groupings, it helps us organize our thoughts as we speak. And just as importantly, they make it much easier for the listener to follow along and of course understand what we're trying to say. It's how we make our speech clear. It's how we make our speech digestible and easy for others to process. Okay? And finally, there's number 7, key or pitch baseline. Now, key is described as the overall pitch, high key versus low key. Now, this refers to the general average height of your voice's pitch throughout a longer period of speaking, perhaps the whole conversation or a significant part of what you are saying. Okay, so if you are speaking in a high key, it means your voice is generally at higher overall pitch level than your usual speaking voice. So this can happen when you are very excited, very surprised, or perhaps when you want to get someone's urgent attention. Now, if you are speaking in a low key, as the name implies, it means your voice is generally at the lower overall pitch level. This might occur when you are being very serious, trying to be confidential, or perhaps feeling very calm. Okay, so the key sets a general tone or context for your entire message, giving a broad hint about your attitude, the importance of what you are saying, or the general mood of the conversation. Okay, all right. Now, in conclusion, all 7 of these components, pitch, stress, rhythm, range, nuclear stress, chunking or thought groups, and key, they all work together in a complex and beautiful way. So they intertwine to create the full, rich tapestry of intonation in our speech. And of course, by understanding these parts, we can see how intonation allows us to communicate very detailed meaning and also convey our emotion as well as make our speech truly effective and engaging. Okay? All right. Now, moving on to this, let's discuss the difference between intonation and tone. Now, this slide, it highlights a very important distinction. Intonation is not equal or is not the same to tone content. So this means that while they are related, they are not exactly the same thing. First, let's understand tone. Now, tone relates to attitude, may it be sarcastic or excited. So, tone is really about the feelings or attitude of the speaker, and it's how you come across when you speak. For example, if you are speaking with a sarcastic tone, of course, you are saying words that mean one thing, but your voice makes it clear that you actually mean the opposite. So, if you are excited, your voice might convey that high energy and happiness. Tone is about the emotional flavor you add to your works, okay? Now let's look at the intonation. The slide tells us that intonation shapes structure and intent of speech. This is a crucial point. Intonation, as we have learned, is the rise and fall of our voice speech, but it does, sorry for that, but it does more than just, show emotion. No, it's more than just showing emotion. It actually helps to build the very structure of our sentence stress and make our intentions clear. It helps the listener understand what kind of message we are sending. Okay, all right. So here, okay, we've done already the ideas here at the top. Now, it says here that tone can be embedded in intonation, but intonation also control grammar cues. Now, this is question versus statement usually. What this means is that your emotional tone can definitely be carried within the way your voice moves or your intention. For example, if you use a dramatic riseful intonation, it can indeed show sarcasm or excitement, as we discussed. Okay. However, intonation here, it does much more than just express emotion. It also provides important grammar cues. This is where intonation helps us figure out if someone is asking a question or just making a statement. So, for instance, a rising intonation often signals a yes or no question, while a falling intonation typically signals a statement. So the words themselves might be the same, but the intonation tells us the grammatical purpose of the sentence. Okay? So to put it simply, while intonation can certainly carry and express, sorry, let me check, carry and express the speaker's tone or attitude, um, its role is broader. Okay? Intonation is a system of pitch changes that also helps organize organize our speech, signal grammatical meanings, and clarify our intentions to the listener. So tone is the feeling, and sorry, tone is our feeling, and intonation is the tool that helps express that feeling, among its other important jobs in communication. Okay, all right, okay. Let's continue with this one. Now we discussed on the difference between intonation and tone. Now let's move on to this. Why intonation problems happen? No, let's recognize that, not just the benefits. We should also try to recognize this area. Okay. Now, of course, why intonation problem happens? This idea or this slide gives us three main reasons why people might struggle with intonation in English. First, one big reason I believe is that different languages have different intonation rules. You can think about it. Every language has its own unique way that sounds are put together. Just like languages have different words for things or different ways to build sentences, they also have their own special music or patterns of how high and low sounds. What sounds perfectly natural in one language might sound strange or even wrong in another language because the intonation rules there are different. So for someone learning English, their brain is used to the intonation rules of their first language, so they might accidentally help or apply those old rules to English, which can lead, of course, to misunderstandings or make their speech sound a bit natural to a native English speaker. It's like trying to play a song on a new instrument, but using the finger positions from an old tool. It just doesn't quite sound right. Okay? All right. Second, some speakers use monotone when nervous. So when people feel nervous, shy, or stressed, their voice might become very flat. Monotone means one tone or very little change in pitch. When someone big, when someone speaks, speaks a monotone or their voice does not go up and down and it lacks the natural melody that English sound lively and clear. So this flatness can happen because being nervous, what do you call that? Okay, all right. Being nervous makes some people hold their voice more rigidly without, the usual flexibility. It's like they're trying to hide their emotion, but in doing so, they also flatten our out their intention, making it harder for listeners to understand the nuances of their message or to feel engaged. Okay. Third, a challenge arises because null hearing stress and pitch changes clearly makes meaning harder to copy. Now, to use intonation correctly, everyone, you first need to be able to hear it clearly. This includes hearing where speakers put stress, which words or parts of words are founder of clearer, and you know, um, and how their pitch, of course, how their pitch, the high and low notes in their voices changes. So if a learner is not good at picking up on these subtle changes when they listen, it becomes very difficult for them to copy or produce these patterns themselves. It's hard to imitate something you can't distinguish, quite distinguishing. You, how do you call that? You, um, where am I? Distinguishing, right? I've mentioned distinguishing, right? Okay. But yeah, when it comes to some speakers use monotone when nervous, while here that's really showcased. So there's flatness in in some people when they try to pronounce some, not try to pronounce, but try to tell another person something. So there's this flatness that can happen because being nervous makes some people hold their voice more rigidly without the usual flexibility. So it's like they trying to hide their emotions, but in doing so, they also flatten out their intonation, which makes it harder for listeners to understand the nuances of their message or to feel engaged. Okay. Third, a challenge arises because that hearing stress and pitch changes clearly makes them harder to copy, right? Because to use intonation correctly, you first need to be able to hear it clearly. This includes hearing where speakers put stress. And again, by definition, pitch is the high and low of notes in their voice. Okay, so if a learner is not good at picking up on these uh, subtle changes when they listen, it becomes a very difficult it becomes very difficult for them to copy or produce these patterns themselves. It's hard to imitate something you can quite distinguish. So this can be due to differences in how their native language uses sound or simply a lack of focused listening practice. If you can't hear that someone's voice is rising at the end of a question, you won't know how to, make your own voice. I'm sorry for that. Well, um, that's just those are just some intonation problems that of course can happen. In short, here, intonation problems often come from the natural influence of other languages. The effects, of course, also with confidence, like if you're nervous, it will show in our voice. And then finally, the difficult in hearing and then copying the specific ways English speakers use the stress and pitch. So understanding these reasons can help us, of course, be more patient with ourselves or others when we're learning to headmasters or something of that sort. Okay? All right. We've gone through a lot today. There's I'll wait for a moment. A lot today. Now, we're going to continue with this since we've identified why intonation problems happen. So the problem is intonation. Now, why intonation problems happen? These are the three main ideas that I've, included in my presentation. Next to that is tips to improve. Again, tips to improve. Okay, we've gone through a lot today, starting with the very basics of intonation. Okay, we are really starting with the fundamentals of speech or of pronunciation. Okay, now this brings us to the tips to improve when it comes to, how do you call that, when it comes to intonation. Okay, some tips to improve. All right, first we have here, we listen to native speakers. So this is super important because it is how we tune our ears to the natural sounds of English. When you listen to people who speak English as their first language, whether it's through movies, TV shows and podcasts, music, or just anything in general, um no, sorry. But yeah, when we try to listen to native speakers, um, depending on the context, of course, maybe, as I've mentioned, podcasts, TV shows, music, or everyday conversations. Okay, so you can pay close attention not just to the words they say and how much um how do you call that? So we try to pay close attention not just to the words they say, but how they say them. So notice where their voice goes up, where it goes down. Okay? All right. That's on listen to native speakers. Continuing, no, more elaboration, I guess. Here, we again pay close attention not just to the words they say, but how they say them. You can notice where their voice goes up, where it goes down, and which words, how do you call this? Um, which, uh, let's just say, we notice that their voices goes up, and when it goes down, which words they emphasize, and which words they emphasize, basically, looking at the banner. Okay, now we have here the more you listen, the more your brain gets used to the music of English, of course. This is the music of English, um, which makes it easier for you, helped, I guess. Okay, all right. So we're doing that. Okay, next. Okay, next we have here imitate short phrases. Now, you don't try to copy long sentences right away, okay? Instead, pick out short, manageable English, how do you call it? Manageable phrases, English phrases. So, listen carefully to how a native speaker says a small group of words like good morning. Um, yes. So that's that, okay? We're done with listening to native speakers. That's really the first tip to improve that I'm giving to you. Listening to native speakers, it really helps a lot. Actually, that's my one of the many ways that I incorporated when I was learning English. Okay, so yes, we identified listen to native speakers. We identified that intonation. The more you listen, the more your brain gets used to the music of English. Okay. Next to that is we have imitate short phrases. Don't try to copy long sentences right away. Instead, pick out short, manageable phrases. Listen carefully to maybe how a native speaker, how do you call that? Um, Going through, first language acquisition. So that's that. That's a bit of her background, I guess. Now, what did she did? Of course, they um another tip I can give you is that you imitate short phrases. Don't try to copy long sentence right away. Instead, you can pick out short, manageable phrases. Okay, all right. Listen carefully to how a native speaker, how do you call that, says a small group of words like good morning or how are you or see you later, okay? Don't try to copy long sentences right away. Instead, pick out short, manageable phrases. You can listen carefully to how a native speaker says a small group of words like good morning, how are you, or see you later that I've mentioned earlier. Those kind of sentences, just an example, okay? Then try to copy how do you call it? Try to copy their intonation exactly. You can repeat it many times until you feel like you've matched their melody or you've matched their melody, yes, your rhythm or all those things. So this helps build your muscle memory for intonation, which makes it easier to produce those patterns before trying or before without thinking too much about them. So it's like practicing individual dance steps before you try to do the whole routine. Okay, all right. Next to that, so far we've the tips that I provided and discussed to you, or listen to native speakers and imitate short phrases. Next to that is mark arrows for pitch. Now, this is a great visual trick, okay? Visual trick. When you're practicing or even just looking at the script, you can draw small up arrows where the voice goes up for this the first arrow. That's a signifier for a voice that goes up. And of course, down arrows, the next arrow, down arrows if the voice goes down. Okay? Very simple, no? If an arrow is up, then we're referring to a voice that is going up. While if the arrow is going down, of course, we're referring to a voice that is going down also. Okay? All right. Maybe an example, if you see the sentence, are you going home? You could write, are you going home? And then put some, let me just, make it easier for you to see. Let's have the sentence. Are you going home? So the stressed word here is home. Okay, let's say that. So we can use this one, an arrow, to signify that this bold word in a bold, feature, we put that arrow. Okay, actually, um, it should be either yeah, it should be above the word home, but I think it's a bit hard to do that, but yeah, let's just use this one. Or maybe it can let's try to do this. Oh no, for a moment. I'm actually trying to find the pen. I cannot find it for some reason. I was able to use it earlier, but I wasn't able to find it now. That's I don't know what is happening. Because I was trying to put, an arrow here. It doesn't necessarily to it doesn't necessarily actually to be looking like this, no, the symbol. It should not be it's not necessarily that it looks like this. Even a straight line could actually be used as a symbol. As long as the symbol is properly properly put, basically, okay? Now, for this, if this is up, no, the word home, the last word is raised, then are you going home? You'll need to remind yourself to raise your pitch, okay? Or you're asking here basically. So for another sentence, we could say, let me type it in for you. I'm going home. Still, the stress is on the word home. I'm going home, so you could write that. This simple method, let's also include the arrow. Okay? Now the arrows, usually it refers to the word that is in bold. Okay? So home. I'm going home. Now this simple method, it helps you visualize the pitch movement and it makes it easier to understand, to remember, and practice the correct intonation patterns. Okay? All right. That is on for mark arrows for pitch. All right, next to that is record yourself. Okay, record yourself. Now, this might feel a bit awkward at first, but like, as you gradually do it, it will be much more natural to you. But it's one of the most because it's one of the most effective ways to improve. You can use your phone, as simple as your phone, or maybe a computer, to record your voice when you practice speaking. And then, of course, the purpose of recording is to listen back to your recording and compare it to a native speaker's version, maybe. It depends on you, actually. So you'll be able to hear very clearly where your intonation might be different from theirs. Like, are you too flat? Are your questions not rising enough? So this self-correction process, it is invaluable that need more practice. It's like watching a video of your own performance to see how you can improve. Okay? All right. That's on the tips to improve. Actually, that is still on the fourth tip. But for a moment, so far for the tips, we've already included listen to native speakers, um, imitate short phrases, mark arrows for pitch, and of course, record yourself. Okay, so we have the last one for a moment. Let me just go back to this one. Where was it? Where was I? Okay, here. We are here on still on tips to improve. Okay. Now, when it comes to the last tip, we have exaggerate at first and then natural later. Now, what does this mean is that when you first when you first start practicing intonation, don't be afraid to overdo it. Okay? Make your ups very high and your downs very low. Really exaggerate the pitch changes. This might feel unnatural at first, of course, almost silly even, but it helps your mouth and your voice muscles. How do you call that? Um, yeah, let's just say your voice muscles learn the new movements. Okay, it trains your voice to be more flexible to after you have trained for an up. Okay, or in hypen. Or maybe an example is where did I get that? That's not an example. Okay, so it's just, let's try to exaggerate something at first and then make it natural later. Actually, you do not make it natural later because there are times that you naturally make something natural to you. Okay? Like you might sound unnatural at first, you find yourself silly saying something, but of course it really helps to train your mouth. Okay, it trains your mouth, your voice, everything that is part of the intonation when we try to say something, everything, all the articulators, even the tongue, the lips, and every articulator that you have that you used when communicating, it really trains them to be more flexible. Okay, which is very important, so that there's if there's flexibility in your mouth, it's really important to have that in a way, because how do you call that, there are times that intonation is a very not really demanding, but you call that it's not really totally demanding, but there are certain cases that you should be able to rise, or you should be able to do some rising or falling intonation when we say a word or even a phrase or even a sentence. So we do that. No, we do we it's important that we train our voice to be more flexible. So we're talking about how practicing intonation helps us gain better control over the pitch of our voice. So you can think of your voice as an instrument. Like intonation, it helps you play more notes and express yourself more dynamically. So what that flexibility really means in practice is that it will help you control your pitch. If you have this particular flexibility, if you master this flexibility, you are able to control your pitch. Like it intonation We understand that intonation involves raising and lowering our voice's pitch to convey different meanings, to convey different emotions or grammatical structures, right? So by consciously practicing this, you train your vocal cords, you train your muscles around them to respond more precisely. So it's like a workout for your voice, which makes it easier to, hit those higher notes for questions or even lower ones for statements. And with that, it can also, I believe, it can also, give you wider range of expression because a flexible voice can express a much wider range of emotions and intentions. Like for example, the very first thing that comes to mind is that if you are excited, of course, we can identify it if your voice naturally go up and down a lot more. Or if you're serious, it might be flatter and lower. We understand that. Or if as simple as if you are asking a question, your voice will often rise at the end. Practicing intonation, it helps you master these subtle shifts so you don't sound monotonous or like a robot, basically. And of course, with flexibility, also, I believe there's clarity and nuance. Sometimes just changing your intonation can completely change the meaning of a sentence. So even with the exact same words, like the example I've given earlier on the word really, maybe we can use another example. Maybe let's try a phrase. You went. Well, it's a sentence already, despite that there are only two words. So he went. Maybe we can use that. For rising intonation, we're asking for confirmation. He went. Again, he went. So we rise on the word went. Or in falling intonation, like we're just trying to state a fact, we can say he went. Yeah, he went. Something like that, no? Being flexible with your intonation, it allows you to clearly convey these nuances, which makes your speech easier to understand and more engaging for your listener. You avoid misunderstandings that might come from a flat or an unvarying tone. Okay? And of course, with flexibility, as I've mentioned, our goal here, since in the tip it mentions there that exaggerated first and natural later. So yes, there's naturalness in speaking. Um, if you are really an English language learner or you're exposed to English, depends on where you are. You've probably noticed that native English speakers uses a lot of intonation without even thinking about it. For us, or for most of you non-native speakers, non-native English speakers, you consciously practice intonation. You consciously practice intonation. You can consciously practice intonation. It's very helpful because consciously practicing intonation helps us sound more natural and less forced when speaking English. Okay? Our voices becomes more adaptable to the rhythm and flow of the language because you consistently practice. It's really important that there's consistent practice when you try to learn something, especially if it really needs some practicing, not just, plain reading and then yeah, grasping the concepts, ingesting those concepts in our minds. Like there's really need in there's if there's a need for practicing, do that because it will really help you to make you sound more natural and less like forced when speaking English. Okay, so here practicing intonation is not just about sounding correct, basically. It's about giving your voice the agility to truly express what you mean and feel. So it makes your communication much more effective and natural. And of course, with that, it's really empowering when you feel that control over your own voice, right? Okay, so it's similar to when we try to do this, exaggerate at first and natural later. It's similar to how an athlete might overtrain certain movements to master them before refining them for a real game. Okay, now these are the tips. No, these are the tips, which are all a great starting point for anyone looking to improve their English intonation. So by actively listening, imitating, visualizing, self-correcting, and practicing with exaggeration, we can gradually make our speech sound more natural, sound clearer, and of course more expressive in English. Okay? Let me check. I believe this is our last yeah, this is our last slide for today. Tomorrow we'll dive deeper into more specific aspects of intonation patterns and how they are used in different contexts. Okay, that wraps up our first lecture on intonation, everyone. I hope you now have a clear idea of how important intonation is in English pronunciation and how it can totally change the meaning of what we are saying. Okay, so for next time, I encourage you to pay more attention to the intonation patterns you hear in daily conversation, whether it's from native speakers in movies or even your friends. Because the more you listen, the more you will pick up on these subtle but crucial details. The more you practice, the more you will sound natural using the English language. Okay? Thanks for joining today, and I'll see you all next time for Lecture 2 on intonation. Goodbye and have a great rest of the night ahead.